All right, welcome everybody to a chance to attend American Kinesiology Association's webinars. Rolling out our first spring webinar with one of our DEI topics, which I'm extremely excited about. We're focusing today on recruiting, hiring, and supporting diverse professionals inside kinesiology, specifically inside higher ed. With me, I've got two individuals who I'm going to have join me right now, Dr. Desmond Delk and Dr. Kanae. Haneishi, I'm going to let you guys introduce where you're from so people can know your background and how you got here and what you're involved with. And then we'll kind of go into our questions that everyone kind of sent in.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kanae Haneishi. I am the associate professor at Western Colorado University.
Hi, everybody. I'm Desmond Delk. I'm an associate professor at Langston University in Oklahoma.
Again, thank you both for joining us. And for those who are hopping online, whether you're coming in via Twitter or whether you're coming in via YouTube or Facebook, by all means, feel free to use that messaging and chat box that feeds to me. I will try to get to your question at some point it may be during the middle of the conversation if it's very relevant, and maybe at the end if we don't catch it in time. But with that being said, we're going to get started so we have time to definitely get to questions at the end that you might have. The first question that we're going to kind of bring up here really is there a lack of a diverse pool of individuals to hire in kinesiology? Because that seems to be a discussion that there's just not enough individuals with a diverse background to hire in the first place.
My answer to that question is yes or no. I think it's well, my field is pedagogy, so I can't speak to the other area in the kinesiology, but I think it's yes, for that answer is we need to still do a better job on recruiting more diverse undergraduate students to our program, and then going on to the graduate program, and eventually taking that to the next step of getting PhDs and doctor degree into the higher ed. That's that. Yes, we definitely need to do a better job recruiting that from the in the underground to get more undergraduate student. But then at the same time, I do feel that there are qualified candidate out there that we may not be reaching out to enough. So I would say that yes or no in that question too. What do you think, Desmond?
Yeah, so I honestly I don't think it's I don't think there's a lack of, and if we believe that to be so, we have to be also reflective on how we either contributed to this, made this gap, exacerbate or whatever the case may be. But I do think that there are a lot of people who are doing the good work within our fields. Um, I do think there are a lot of opportunities for us to continue to diversify the field, and I think we just have to ask questions, right? We do a great job of building coalitions, collaborations, and simply friendships among each other's different departments. And we have to see who is graduating from each person's department. We also have to, as Kanae mentioned, strengthen what we do in the undergraduate program to encourage those students from an array of backgrounds, because that's where you have a wide pool of students to get them to go into the graduate programs and then the subsequent doctorate programs, so that we can also diversify this field on the doctorate level as well. So,
Yeah, can I
yeah,
add that too?
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think it's when you hear like, oh, we don't have enough diversity in the pool, I would say that's kind of excuse. I think there is like enough. Again, we do need to do still better job on recruiting that more diverse student, but I think there are enough individuals with a diverse background out there that the program directors or like search committee chair or department chair might not be doing enough job on outreaching those individuals.
Yeah, I believe that's as well, right? Outreach, and we're not saying. I mean, within your institute, universities, right? I know several of the programs in AEKA, they come from relatively large institutions, many of them with robust athletic programs, right? And so the art of recruiting students, we've kind of mastered it at our universities, and those type of approaches that are used, for athletics from students from so many different backgrounds, those tactics or those approaches can also be used, when we're recruiting students from for our programs. And because we know exactly where certain students come from, where students from diverse backgrounds come from, where people are primarily located, we can also do those type of outreach initiatives to recruit students, and also train these students throughout the process.
Mm.
Good points, and I definitely can understand the idea of growing your own and kind of encouraging people to push further into those areas. With that being said, I'm going to bump to our next question. Again, if anyone out there watching has questions, send them in to us. You can do it through Twitter, Facebook, wherever. Those feed right into me, and I can ask them as they come up. My second question is, what are some recommendations to improve individuals with diverse backgrounds applying for positions?
Yeah, can I start? I would start. Let's say, like putting the diversity, like, or EDI, DI statement on the job description is not going to be enough, I don't think. I think it's like what you need to do is to, again, it's outreach. Like, do you pick up the phone, making a phone call to the graduate program that who are known to, not produce, but have the individuals that with a diverse background, or like when you go to like conferences, like, do you actually like intentionally talking to the individuals with diverse background to see if they are interested in applying to your position? I think you just need to do a little bit more like extra work to do that if you that's something that is really important to you and you in your department. But again, like you see when you try to apply a job and then you're looking at the job description nowadays, like every single university has that. We're encouraging individuals with diverse background to apply, but I don't think that's going to be enough. It's more like, being outspoken, that's your priority, one of the priorities of hiring. And then the individuals with diverse background will hear you, like, oh, so, that program is actually valuing the diversity and the individuals with diverse background, and then they will apply.
I too feel as if the EDI statements that are attached to job announcements are probably skipped over, just like the mission statements or the vision statements with the school, right? So I think it's very, very imperative that we clearly outline those things in which we're looking for those particular positions, right? If it's number of publications or a potential to do scholarship in what particular field, right? Is it biomechanics? Oftentimes within our announcements within kinesiology or physical education, they're very, very broad, right? And sometimes they're so broad that it's exclusive, but then also so broad that it's also inclusive, right? So so oftentimes where people may apply for jobs where they may not even get any feedback from it because it's been so broad, they thought they would possibly be eligible for the job, but because there wasn't as much specificity within the job announcement, they had already been excluded from the position, right? Unbeknownst to them. So I guess if we are a little bit more clear in our job announcements, also like sending the job announcements directly to graduate students that we might have met at AKA or NACI or anyone, any of those conferences where we know that doctoral students go, right? So directly sending those job announcements to those people. Again, after looking at AKA, I noticed that we have, you have different tiers, right? From undergraduate, masters, and doctorates. So we have these networks of people where we can send messages or send those announcements directly to our colleagues at these different schools. So we ensure that where we know that there's a training ground for doctoral students, we will be getting, we will have, that direct contact as opposed to kind of like, taking a big stab at it on like higheredjobs.com or maybe the Chronicles job database. So I think specificity and how we announce. And again, I'm not, with the EDI statements, I think they're cool to have. Right. But again, I think also that it's not one of the most attracting things, especially if our daily actions at our institutions do not align to these ideals that we say that we want to achieve with, equity, diversity, inclusion, justice, or belonging.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like targeting it, certain locations, conferences, organizations to actively recruit. I think that's a good strategies. And then I think it's in addition. Can I add one thing? Is I think it's addition to that, knowing that some individuals, not all of them, but some individuals with like diverse background may not be trained enough or may not be good at it, like selling themselves to go outreach compared to the counterwise, maybe, like that's because maybe they have been turning down so much in their lives because of their background, or like they may not have had a lot of mentorship opportunities throughout like growing up, or like like family members, or like just maybe they may have a limited resource compared to the counterwise. I think that's knowing that or being aware that that some call might be extra obstacle might be important when you're actually going out and recruiting too.
No, I think that's a good point. Just to reference a previous AK webinar we had that Kanae, you were on, where we talked about intersectionality and the burden that comes with that. Sometimes that plays a role both on assumptions and on reality of the complications when bringing people in. I think that's an excellent point. I just want to reiterate, what I took away from a couple different things was, besides specificity that you brought up, also the fact is build those relationships and get to know people. I think that resonates when we talk about you're inviting someone with a diverse background to a department that does not have a diverse background in general, that they feel welcomed on the conversations up front before being like, hey, let's just see how you fit in. That raises all sorts of interesting questions based on that. And so it leads to my next question, which is one we all talked about that came up in the conversation, as we've recently had multiple states decide to insert themselves into DEI initiatives in higher ed. And so I guess the question I have for you is as we're seeing some states try to claw back DEI initiatives or statements, is that a problem going forward? Their viewpoint seems to be, for a few of these states, that DEI is just trying to check boxes to get people in, and that's its only purpose or anything it serves. It's not really a do you agree or not agree with the statement. I guess just your thoughts, because it's going to definitely affect us.
Desmond, go ahead. I need a little more time.
I think we have to figure out what DEI, actually means to us, right? So what is this idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, right? And, people also say justice, and you also have belonging, right? And I think belonging is one of those things when we think about socialization of new faculty members, right? Do they belong to your department? And oftentimes we know that when we think this idea of belonging is, right, just being able for a person, allowing a person to be able to be themselves at their institution, be able to be heard. That doesn't mean that everything that's said from anyone is going to be accepted, but allowing those people a place at these tables to be professionals. So I guess the question about like government involvement. So I guess when we think about particularly what's happening in like Florida, and then a lot of states are trying to, Texas as well in particular, are trying to they say shut them down. And here in Oklahoma, the Secretary of Education want to do assessment of how much money was spent on these initiatives, on DEI initiatives. And so I think the main thing is they're basing it in the idea of us making sure that we focus on trying to develop professionals who are equipped with the ability to do well in whatever the companies or job readiness that they're aspiring us to be preparing these students for. A part of that is making sure that we understand the dynamics of the organizations that we work in, right? So emphasizing diversity, equity, inclusion is because we're dealing with a diverse group of people, right? Not only like race, but also ability level, ethnicity, nationalities, language, and we have to consider all these things, because as we develop competent workers, they also need to be competent in the field, right? So again, they oftentimes like to use like the sciences or the STEM. So like in engineering, and people like to say like just being an engineer is like numbers and things, but there are also relationships as well. Building buildings, making sure networks work are a part of being able to work in with diverse groups of people. So for the government to say this needs to be shut down, or governmental entities saying that needs to be shut down in what we do, I think that is kind of oxymoronic to the idea of preparing people for the workforce.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It's yeah. I don't wanna say like disagree, agree, but I think it's more like gov yeah. I don't know. Government it's in okay. Government involvement around the DI issues is sometimes good because it's making into the policy making and the decision making, the fund and stuff like that. But particular decisions are very much influencing the field too. So again, like I don't have an answer to that, but what Desmond said, like I think it's when government coming into too much on what to do around DI, and then influencing people's like decisions are I don't know might be too much on the certain type of decisions. But again, like I can see sometimes government involvement in again, I see this question right here on the screen, say government involvement on DI. Sometimes it's helpful, So it depends, I think. Is that answer questions?
Oh man, I think that's a fair point. I really do. I think it's a tough topic because really there's a lot of statements, but no one doing anything yet. So you don't know really what the plan is with all that. And so I didn't want to spend a ton of time on it because this is all in the last month. It's all just kind of popped up, right? As far as statements coming from governors and things like that on initiatives made in higher ed. Not saying new issue, but newer ways of looking at handling it.
Yeah.
With that, I want to just give a shout out. Thank you guys for those who are sending out likes. I can see those. Thank you, Alexander, for your comments from Bakersfield. We appreciate it. For those who have if your Facebook turned on or anything else turned on, by all means, feel free to send in questions if you want. We'll go over them when we get a chance. So questions also that I think have come up kind of that we've discussed before is really just, are there any considerations that you should make when you host a potentially diverse hire? I know this conversation came up because we all shared some different topics or horror stories that we've had that I'm not going to reiterate, but just awkwardness that sometimes happens when people are trying to, like, we're hosting a diverse hire. Is that supposed to be different, not different from what we do normally bring in? Any thoughts, considerations?
So you often hear people say, what, treat people the way you want to be treated, but I don't even know how people want to be treated. Some people, but here it is. So when you get that diverse potential, that interview, I say just treat them as you would with anybody else, right? You don't have to I've heard a story about from somebody else that they brought them to a particular Black community, was saying, hey, we want you to build relationships here, right? So I think when we have these you're hosting people, have the same level of expectations that you would with any other faculty member, wherever they may have come from, man, woman, Black, white, whatever the case may be, non-binary. Everybody just needs to be treated like, consistently, right? This is what we expect from you. Are there any things that you need, right? Asking what the needs are from that person. I also don't think you need to have the expectation that a person who has some type of phenotypical similarities with communities in which you're trying to get an inroad to should not be expected to be able to build those roads, right? Or to build those relationships with the expectation that you wouldn't have with anybody else. Case in point, be more specific. For example, if a person is coming to a school, and which a lot of times these institutions are in communities of color, particularly Black communities, and you expect them to work in the Black school district, right? Because that person is Black, right? And so not expecting that person to be able to fix centuries old um, centuries old problems that existed between the community and the institution. Just have realistic expectations for that person, like you would have for any other assistant professor who's coming in the role. Same course releases, same considerations that you would have for anybody else who has recommendations or requests in the first year or two in the field.
Yeah, like Desmond said, I think it's really depend because I think it's almost like go different direction on this answer from Desmond in this particular question. I would appreciate that if I go to the interview or like I don't know, for my case, if I get connected with someone with a similar background, it just because depending on the schools, but I want to feel comfortable with the institutions and people. If your program doesn't have much diversity, but if you connect me with someone in your university is a similar background, I feel like okay, this person is happy and then being successful in this institution. So maybe I can see myself doing that. Or like if you are bringing in a candidate with diverse background and who has a family member, and if you you know talk about like how the school system there, how the school diversity or demographic wise, or like how the school is dealing with like DI issues there. I think I would appreciate that then because I feel more safe and comfortable moving into the new city or new town. But I do see what Desmond said too. Don't treat the person like be like very in a unique way. But I think that something extra consideration like that. If I were the person, I'd appreciate because I want to feel safe when I'm taking that position, or I want to feel my family to be comfortable if I'm moving into the community. So that's again like depending on the individuals, but I think that's something that you know you should
Yeah,
consider.
and can I agree with you? You're right. And so when thinking about that, right, finding how supporting housing for families, understanding what the school district is for your children, school age children, are also similar requests and expectations that you have with any faculty member who
Right.
would come in. And I also do agree with you too, Kanae, like finding helping a person find an affinity group. So when we're having conversations within those the Zoom interviews now, or the phone interviews, which we used to call it, but now Zoom interviews, find out a little bit more, a couple of personal things that you could connect the person with another faculty member who has similar experiences that they may have. But you can't just I won't recommend just to connect the potential Black faculty hire with the other Black person that works at the institution. If that person, if that person who's at the university really hasn't shown themselves to be a person who prioritizes that as well, or mentorship, right? Again, we've all heard about like great mentors or people you would not use as mentors, and I think that should be considered in all aspects, especially when you're trying to connect people with potential people who will make a cross country move a little bit more palatable, especially when the communities are very, very different. So for me, I moved from Atlanta, Southwest Atlanta, Georgia, or just Southwest Atlanta, all the way to the middle in rural Oklahoma, and so that was very, very different for me, right? Although I teach at a historically Black university, it was still a transition for me to come here, where literally on campus we have goat farms, right? And so that was a different. And so for the institution to ask me what I needed, how I would transition, and connecting me with and so this has been like 8 years ago, so I'm not really young anymore, but younger faculty, right, who I could probably connect to, who would allow me to make that transition from Southwest Atlanta by way of Auburn to now rural Oklahoma.
No, certainly. I think it's also connect I'm gonna add that one more thing. Maybe like in addition to connecting to that is, I think when you're hosting, you know what? I think everyone pretty much, but like especially if you are hosting a candidate or individuals with diverse background, just to make sure that have little bit of education about that person's background. I think that's very helpful. At least the search committee members, like one comment or one action, like really can turn around that, can really disappoint the candidate. So like, what's the example? Example would be like, I don't know. Let's say like, I don't know, like say that, so say the person's, make sure you can say the person's name right, or like maybe like, again, I am okay, but if you are recruiting like international scholar from Asia, like maybe like not give some little bit more bigger personal space. I don't know. That might not be a good example. I think to just like do good education or like research on that person's background or cultural or like racial, or like, so like that, make sure that you make the person as comfortable as possible, and then like, yeah.
No, I think those are all good points, and I'm gonna piggyback a couple things with that. I think that play a role. One, we had a comment come in about this question from Alexander Escobar, and I thought was a good point that falls in line with kind of what we're talking about right now when asking, should we have any considerations that are going to be kind of different? And the argument here is yes, it should be different. When you're dealing with different people, you need different walks of life in your team. And I think that's kind of where, and I'm not trying to speak for Alexander entirely, but I kind of feel like that's where this conversation's gone between the two of you now. It's where you are recognizing people are different, and you do need to address those possible individual needs while still maintaining. Kanae, you brought up the issue of like safety and concern, which we know that in the past 5 years we've seen an increase in I'd say aggressive acts towards Asian Americans or Asians in general. And I think also paying attention to someone's original culture is important, because again, when we say the word Asian American or just Asians in general, that is a very broad place. And I know for a fact there's people who do not take the time to learn, is the person they're interviewing of cultural descent from Chinese, Japanese, South Korea, or may not pay enough attention to recognize, are they from India? And so that's all inclusive in that term. But if you're not taking the time to learn, there's very, very cultural differences that play a role. But that being said, I have a lot of respect for something that you brought up, Desmond, which is the point that is not the person who you're hiring's job day one to walk in the door and be culturally taxed. It's not their job to represent, or should it be put on them that they're going to represent a racial or cultural expectation of your department to whatever interfacing group. That's a tough thing, but in higher ed, we've seen it happen. In fact, cultural taxation is based out of a term from higher ed before it spread to business and other areas. And I think that's so important to bring up, because I think that's what happens sometimes with hires by accident or whatever design. They're like, we finally brought this person in. They'll do a better job interacting with this group, and let's kind of introduce that early. And so I think, like I said, this is a tough topic of how much do you recognize different, how much do you do the same, right? And separating professional versus individual needs.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. I was just saying with Alexander Escobar, thanks for your for being here. That yes, it should be different, right? There should also be some similarities as well. It should be the extent that we're, that we know there's this noticeably different way we're treating this person from any other job interview, right? So we should treat that person with the same level of respect, the same level of expectations that we would have with any hire, right? To really bring out the red carpet. That's the idea of the on-campus interview, like to affirm who this person said they were on paper and the phone interview, and to attract that person to our institution. So yes, when I mean like similarities, those efforts should be the same. And so then so what we talk about oftentimes is adaptability, right? We have a whole field under our umbrella that talks about adapting. And so that is that should be our approach. We adapt based upon who we are. I mean, what individual that we're working with. And again, looking at the background, as Kanae said, as Daniel emphasized as well.
No, excellent. Thank you. We're going to have two more topics kind of rolling through, and then we'll go ahead and take more questions. So if you have questions, by any means, submit them to me right now, and that way we can try to get them all in as we're going through. Let me go ahead and bring up the next question we had here. So when a person with a diverse, and this may overlap with the last one, so it doesn't have to be as long if you feel like it kind of overlaps, but when a person with a diverse hire or background takes their first job, what are some immediate recommendations? And this is really from the standpoint of the people who are hiring. However, if people happen to be watching or can be, of course, if for those watching and you don't get to finish this, or you happen to know someone who should see this, this is saved on YouTube. This is saved on Facebook, so they can go back and watch this at any time. But feel free also to comment if you're wanting to talk to someone who is of a diverse background who would be looking for their first job or hiring.
Well, I think it's like acknowledging that the first hiring, yeah, but definitely provide a support, right, and the mentorship and the connect with communities and then campuses, and make probably like the individuals with a similar background. That's we have already talked about that, But I think in addition to that, like acknowledging it, like the racism or like discrimination is real there. I think that's super important that's acknowledging it, and then we walk, then acknowledging that we are walking through that part. I think it's like sometimes like people just generally people hear that like the news, or the people hears that other people's stories and social medias and stuff like that. But then when you are seeing, when they're talking about their actual program, their program or department, they don't think that exists. I think it exists everywhere. Everyone has unconscious bias. I think it's acknowledging that definitely helps everyone in the program or department to treat it in a just way. But just again, like acknowledging also like the individuals with diverse background. Again, everyone's different. I understand that, but I know Desmond can, support this part too. But like individuals with diverse background had like extra obstacles. That's because of that's because of who they are, and then like acknowledging is so important. So like then make sure you support that part. Like for example, like in my case, it's like just checking in frequently. Okay, you do that with a new faculty, but like sometimes like that faculty member with a diverse background or different country or different culture may not have access to the food that they were eating at home, like, or like it's like like those continuous racial like hate crimes that we see in our society might be affecting the individuals more than you think. That's because of the background and like the experience that they have had growing up. So like just acknowledging and then make sure you are aware of that is, I think, feels much more if I have that, I do, but if that person has colleagues who does the understanding, it doesn't matter if that person is white or like American or whatever. I think that makes that person much more feel belonging. That's the word that Desmond was using, and then feel part of it too.
Yeah, so I believe some things you can consider to do always is ask the person what they need, right? And so when you typically ask them, and try to provide that. So in the job interview, you ask the person what they need, and some of those things are like course releases and number of classes, hours, time, time when the class will be offered, right? Those type of things. So once the person gets to your campus, now I think it's really trying to find out what they need. What else do they need, right? So what I need on a daily basis, man, checking in with that person as you would with anybody else, right? Checking on, see what they need, trying to connect that person with affinity groups based upon what that person has said that they're interested in. A lot of people have their own web pages, with all the things they like to do, both personal and academic, so to speak. And so I would say, man, just try to connect those people with those resources within your community, within the university, within the local community, within the greater city that they live in. And so um, again, one thing I recommend, that person should not be the only person and should not always get pulled to every diversity committee that you have on campus. I think they should be considered, but however, and they should also not serve as that diverse person on that one committee, right? To try to diversify, because after a while, the load becomes heavy, right? And although that person might have had a course release or something within that year from the whatever year it may be, from the heavy load of all the service that the person has to fulfill, also has an undue burden, right? That a lot of people, that some other groups of people don't have, because they may not fit within that box that this new hire has. So I think just considering that, right, just the workload like you would for anybody else, consistently checking in on the person, and also for when you're in your attempt to do these things, asking the person what they need, and also understand that you made mistakes and trying to introduce that person to somebody or something. But I think also owning up to mistakes that we may make with trying to build relationships with people is something that if we do, we understand that things were not done in malice or whatnot, and that we can kind of move forward as a department, college or whatever, however we classify it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like, like give the support that person that they need, and then just like you do with the other new faculty members. But like I think it's understanding the extra obstacles that new faculty member might be facing. It's so important. Like I think the one of the potential extra obstacles that I could think of was like, some student might give a hard time to the new faculty member. That's because I'm Asian, or that's because you're black, or like that's because I'm female, or whatever it is. So that might or maybe just we don't look like, or we don't talk like a majority of student in the classroom. I don't know, but I think just since topic is the individual faculty member with diverse background, I can emphasize that. I would like to emphasize that the faculty member with diverse background are facing the extra obstacles, or could potentially facing the extra obstacles, and then like paying attention to that, I think is very important.
Yeah, and I think this brings to a point about as faculty, we're as hiring faculty and other faculty members, we are trying to make sure we're welcoming to these new hires. But if those efforts don't permeate through the department, right, altogether, from the classes and the expectations from the students within our departments. And so we know that we're pretty familiar with the history of America, and we know that institutions of higher education were a part of that that history. And so we know that a lot of our schools are, while we have these DEI departments, because we're trying to make these changes within the school, right? Every year we see that there are racial issues that are happening at institutions, which will continue to happen, right? But I think as we continue to ensure that not only the faculty within our department will be accepting of new faculty and new ideas, that these are the expectations for our students as well. And so when we develop these mission statements or these vision statements for our department, it has to be departmental wide, right? So it's not enough just for the faculty and the staff of the department to know what we're trying to achieve. The students have to know what we're trying to achieve as well. Within our syllabi and those expectations within the syllabi, when we have, when you think about CAPE accreditation, there are these dispositions that students should have. And our individual departments, where irrespective of being teacher ed or kinesiology based focused biomechanics or whatever, that we need to have these expected dispositions or these qualities in which our students should be in pursuit of. And that means of understanding the differences in cultures, races, ability levels, everything in between. And so again, if it just stops at faculty, who we spend limited time for, but then you go into a classroom up to, I don't know, up to about 75 people, right, who are just dismissive, right, of that person because of the possible. Oftentimes, students say, well, they're not speaking English, right, because it doesn't go at the pace in which they're familiar with. And so you have 75 people being disrespectful to that faculty member. To me, that is a reason that faculty member may leave the institution when we're not receiving that wraparound support, right?
Totally.
Yeah, I think that speaks to kind of our next topic too. So we'll go ahead and transition to that, and I have the comment to go with that. I do have questions coming in, so I want to make sure we leave room time for those to be able to answer. And so the first thing I'm going to bring up real quick to end as our last question is there any long-term support considerations that could be made? You've already brought up some that kind of fall into that, and it's some of the things you guys are bringing up are great, but I'm going to point out that, as a person who is a middle-aged white guy, like I'm not going to, I don't have that lived experience. So I may not even see these things coming to the door for a faculty member who I'm helping with or working with, right? I mean, I know that these things could be issues because I've never seen them as an issue, right? And so, my only thought process on this is to spend more time getting to educate myself so that way I'm aware of those things happening, because sometimes you're checking with faculty, but they don't want to bring up like this is a problem. And so, and I'll point out that, our most recent AK workshop that we just did in January focused on DEI topics and brought a lot of awareness to a lot of these issues that people may not have been aware before because they have not taken the time to educate themselves. Now, that's a long-term strategy I recommend for anybody, but are there others that you guys would recommend?
No, I think it's education, the people in the program or department. And like Desmond said, I think brought a great idea of the student too. I think it's a good, it's a must, like if you are still having a Christmas party and around the holiday time, that when you have a faculty member who don't celebrate Christmas, or like if you're like decorating the common space in the department and on the Christmas things, that's when you have, again, when you don't have the faculty, who don't celebrate Christmas, or, just the little things like that, just really like sometimes maybe it's little things for majority of people, but it's a big deal for the, one person, right? So I think just paying attention and educating everyone in the department, the program. And then again, I think I liked Desmond's point of like educating the student as well. I think that's very important, those are just Christmas things are just example, but so for example, like I don't have a middle name. Japanese people doesn't have a middle name, but like when I'm taking a survey, campus-wide survey, and then like middle name is a required field, I was just like, I'm gonna put like two of my first name in it, something like that. It's just like it's a silly things, might be little things, but but might be big things for the little, one person, right? So I think just little education, goes like a long way.
Yeah, I appreciate that, right? So again, I think and that's one of, we call it I don't know what they call it, the Christmas Wars or Attack on Christmas or something like that. And we know that we get it, right? We know where we are. However, right, if it difficult to call a holiday party, right? It's no longer a Christmas party. Could it be called the holiday party? Could it be called the end of the semester party, right? Where we're just coming together to collaborate. We can do the gift exchange or whatever you want to do, right? But again, when we're talking about making those, I'm not even gonna say small adaptations, right? Because if it's been a long tradition, there's a change. So just making those adaptations. In the field of coaching, we typically talk about adjustment, right? When a player goes out and makes a mistake, we say you got to adjust. And we have to be willing to adjust each other, right? So when you have those students that come to your office and say disparaging comments about that new faculty member, again, a person who here, we have we have several faculty in the math department from African descent, and students say, well, they're not speaking English. I have to check them right there and say, yes, the person is speaking English, right? You have to be willing to check yourself. You need to be able to check your colleagues, and you definitely need to be able to check your students. Some behaviors that people espouse are inappropriate, right? They're inappropriate. They may be unintentional. but we can't support it, right? We have to check each other. And I think within that so those things don't continue, right? And then we just be a little bit more inclusive. We don't waste people's time in terms of like doing all these surveys, doing the roundtables, asking us what we need, and none of those things are implemented. And I get it. We need institutional research and things of that nature. We keep checking our boxes. And at what point are we going to execute those things that we say? And they don't have to be monumental. They don't have to be huge. I mean, small things matter as well.
Yeah,
I
agree. I really second with that. I think a lot of institutions, okay, we are hosting 3 brown bag lunch on the pen, right? Check. But then like, I don't know if they're doing it like the execution, strategical, like cultural change execution, like, to make really like the campus or community inclusive. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I think that it raises a lot of good points also in the box checking to make sure everyone's feeling okay. Okay, we can move forward doing business as usual. That comes up as we just came out of February, and suddenly we just go back to like, well, February we did all the things, we got our month done, check those boxes, and now we're back to 11 other months of not focusing on that thing. Yeah, I get it. I think it's interesting. I'm not going to say the whole detail, but my students and I had a conversation about this issue yesterday, and how that just seems to happen where we rotate, check everyone's boxes, have all the meetings during all the specific time periods, all the celebrations, and ignore like it's not an issue the rest of the time. It doesn't get addressed. So with that, I kind of want to bring up comments and questions that we've had. We've had a couple ones come up, and so I've got 2 I really want to focus on real quick with the time we have left. I know, Kanae, you may not be with us long, so I apologize about that. We had one, the question's for both you, but it starts off, Darla, thank you, gives a shout out to Dr. Delk. What recommendations do you have for the applicant in applying or interviewing for a position with a less diverse department or university?
So unless you're going to do like a historically Black college, or maybe a tribal college, or maybe Hispanic serving institution, depending upon, what that threshold is, you're going to go into those places where it's going to be less diverse. Again, I think you're trying to find out trying to build a relationship with that person, right? Let that applicant know what you have to offer here at the university, what is available at the university, and finding out what they need. Trying to connect them to those affinity groups, people similar to them, things that are of interest to them, and allowing that person to have a true voice within the department, right? And I'm a very critical person, like when people bring new ideas. And so just before you say something to the new idea, see how it can actually fit within, the ethos of the department. And one thing that I think we also can do is just really kind of check and see what the ethos of the department is. Is it a sustainable ethos of, or does it need to be changed and adapted? Or are we even living up to the ethos that we set, right? Or have we just kind of like set on our laurels per se, and not really lived up to those things in which we say we want to do? Hey, Darla.
Yeah. Yes, I am actually, like at the institutions, that diversity might not be one of our strengths, but I feel much comfortable and I'm happy here because I think that people around me have good education about the DI and then like inclusiveness too. So they know, they understand that. So like, I would say like a lot of institutions in the nation are more like that board than, the diversity might not be one of their strengths, right? But then try to be. Then I think it's like just to make sure that you, like I said, acknowledge the challenges that we might face, but also like being upfront, like of openness. I think that goes a long way, Then doesn't have to, if you cannot connect somebody with a similar background, but like if you can connect to someone who really understand, or at least like showing understanding, and I think that's very good too.
Yeah, Kanae. I also think too, to add on, like just don't ignore the obvious, right? So I think, and when it came to George Floyd, nobody really could ignore that, right? But historically, there are hot topic issues that happen on a national level that we ignore, that we know it may affect that particular group, that person where the group that they may associate themselves with, or just people in general, right? When we talk about injustices that happen throughout the country, so really addressing that, not just like ignoring it and just kind of walking through as if something didn't happen on a national level, right? I think so. Just addressing real issues and trying to have conversations with it, right? And I think because for us to ignore it, might be perceived as us not caring, and we do care, but we may approaching it with trepidation because we don't know if we're going to offend that person, but we might be offending by just like ignoring it, thinking that nothing really occurred.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend like do like bystander training. Like that's a lot of university has done that, but I think that is totally like true.
That's good.
All right. So I'm going to bring up this last question. And since we are short on time, and I know we got people who have to get places, I'm going to say go ahead and give your thoughts after I read it off. Yes, no, and why. Alexander gave a response about taking a job as a Latino in a predominantly white community. The focus he wants to point out is the ability he had to have a mentor or supervisor with a similar background be able to show him the ropes. And that really made a huge difference. So this is a great question. I know some of us have talked about in the past. Is it recommended that you find a mentor? And when I say that, I mean a good mentor, a good mentor with a similar background, if possible, to also assist with anything that might help career-wise or personal-wise? Because most universities do have mentorship programs, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about also maybe an additional mentor that aligns with, say, their diverse background.
So I'm not a black woman at all, but I have my mother, right? And so when I think about my mother, I think about which she does a lot of stuff at home now, but trying to get a place where she can get her hair done, or where they say your hair dressed, right? So trying to find that. So I think it would be good if you connected a person with somebody who would have a similar background, right? But again, it has to be a good person, right, who can serve as a good mentor. Because we have similar backgrounds doesn't mean that we'll mesh or that we will connect. So it could just be something disastrous, right? Again, if a person has like diabolically opposed ideas that I have, right? But we kind of look alike, and we may even both be from Southwest Atlanta. But I think that's very, very important that we find. So those small things matter, right? Particular grocery stores, like particular foods that are served within different communities, right? I guess like for Alexander, you talk about Latino, so maybe a Latino grocery store or something to get certain different type of spices to try to connect those things that are important to you, trying to bring them to your new location. I do also think that you should have a great mentor, be a part of the mentor program, even if somebody doesn't have the similar experiences you have, because that person may know the institution, and that person could help you with your research, your outreach, and just being able to transition, right? And so, but I definitely think both of those are important. I think you can have as many mentors, not as possible. Well, I guess it's possible, but that will help you to get achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah, I like I said already previously, for my case, definitely yes.
No, excellent. And I thought you both bring up great points in that comment, and the fact that things like hair, food, things like that can easily be taken for granted by certain groups on the importances that plays with other groups. We don't always have the thought process or weight the same thing. In the last decade, I've gotten to learn a lot of that working with people, which is great because it's also meant I got to connect a lot of people for answers I don't have. I'm like, that's a great question. I don't know. Let me find someone who would fall in that bracket. I think that's important. But yeah, that's the time we're at with 156. And I know you've got a class to get to. But I appreciate you guys. Any last minute comments you want to leave?
Go ahead, Kanae, since you can.
Well, yes, I have to hop off for classes, but I want to thank you for inviting us to be here. I think it's because it's very, very important topic, and then I appreciate that these small webinar doing that will help us, the community of kinesiology community, to be truly more inclusive and diverse, the value of it. So I really appreciate that you are taking a time to hosting this, and then again, and the important topics.
Thank you. So I definitely, again, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you all for listening. I definitely want to encourage people, like, this process won't be fixed within 1 year, right? To try to get different voices amongst our institutions to make sure that we have a better prepared group of professionals to kind of lead this world. I strongly encourage you all to continue to build relationships with institutions, right, that are not similar to yours. In the Southeast, there are abundance of historically Black colleges where we have students who are ready to be trained in the graduate level, right? To be able to, I was one of those students, Dr. Russell, Jared Russell, who's going to be the president-elect. He was one of those people who came to Morehouse College, which is a historically Black college, to get us into the master's programs, right? And you have those throughout your particular state, right? You have those students who might have come from socially economic diverse backgrounds, right? That also need connections to the doctorate program, and from there we have to grow our own. Like, so from Dr. Russell from Dr. Russell's work, there have been about at least 10 new PhD, newer. I've been in 8 years. Newly minted PhDs from diverse backgrounds who are now dispersed throughout the country, teaching at different institutions. And so it's going to take a time frame, but we also have to make a commitment. So build relationships at other institutions. Thinking about AKA and the Kinesiology Review, I think in 2013, the second issue, Dr. Sarah Price kind of described their partnership between FAMU and Auburn University specifically. So within the Kinesiology Review are several articles that talk about this as well, and ways to build and establish these relationships with institutions. You can always email me for my thoughts. So thank you all.
Again, thank you, everyone. We appreciate everything. We have more upcoming webinars for the spring, too. Look out for those announcements in the next couple of weeks as we're nailing down dates. Again, Desmond, Kanae, thank you so much, both on a personal level and on behalf of AKA, for taking the time to come out and have this conversation.
Thank you.
You guys are amazing. Take care. And we're going to sign off now. So have a great day, everybody.
All right,
Thank
peace.
you.